There is a certain kind of person who is deeply strange. They walk into a room, and within 10 seconds, their brain has already completed a full scan that no one asked for. No raised voices. No conflict. The party is still going on. Glasses are still clinking. Music is still playing. But they have already noticed something. A glance pulled away just a fraction too quickly when two people made eye contact. A smile that appeared right on cue, but never quite reached the eyes. A sentence that sounded completely normal, yet carried beneath it a cold, invisible current, like an iceberg, harmless above the surface, enormous underneath. Everyone else looks around and sees a perfect evening. They look around and see a performance in progress. Many people hear this and think, "Oh, how remarkable. Isn't that a gift?" But wait, because that gift comes with a price that no one ever prints on the label. Their brain has no off switch. When the party ends, when everyone leaves with warm smiles and promises to meet again, they sit alone in their car and the analysis begins. Why did he look away at exactly that moment? What did she mean by that? That 3-second silence. What was it hiding? They carry the entire evening home with them. Pull it apart piece by piece. Put it back together. Then pull it apart again. At 2 o'clock in the morning, while the rest of the world sleeps, they are still sitting there, surrounded by fragments, turning them repeatedly in their mind. If you are reading this and feeling something familiar, a quiet, almost tender ache of recognition somewhere in your chest, then perhaps you understand them more than you realized. Or perhaps you are one of them. And if that is true, then you already know, living with a mind like this is not easy. Not because you are too sensitive, not because you are weak, but because you are constantly perceiving hidden layers of meaning that most people walk straight past without a second glance. The way someone walks past a painting without ever noticing that the figure inside it is weeping. It is power, and it is a burden, and the line between the two is far thinner than you might think. Today, we are going to go deep into the psychology of hyper-aware people, those who always see more, feel more, and because of that, sometimes hurt more than anyone else in the room. Not to fix them, not to change them, but so that they, and perhaps you, can finally be seen. Because there are people who spend their whole lives seeing everything clearly, except themselves. Before we can understand what this awareness does to a person, we have to go back further. We have to ask the question almost no one thinks to ask. Why does a mind like this exist in the first place? Because no one chooses this. No one wakes up one morning and decides to start analyzing every glance, every pause, every shift in the atmosphere around them. Something made them this way. Psychology tells us there are two roads that lead here. The first road, born this way, scientists call them highly sensitive persons. People carrying a trait called sensory processing sensitivity, wired into them from birth, long before they had any say in the matter. Think of a musician who can hear a single instrument playing out of tune in a full orchestra, while everyone else simply hears music. That is what it feels like to be born this way. Their nervous system is not broken. It is simply calibrated differently. Finer, deeper, more precise. The world arrives to them in ultra-high definition. Every emotion slightly more weight-bearing. Every silence slightly more loaded than it appears. It is not a disorder. It is simply the way they were built. The second road, built by survival, this one is harder to talk about. Because the people on this road did not arrive here through biology. They arrived here through survival. Neuroscience calls this hypervigilance, a state where the brain learns, through repeated experience, that the world is unpredictable, that the ground can shift without warning, that safety is never guaranteed. It almost always begins in childhood. Picture a child growing up in a home where the emotional weather changes without forecast. This child cannot simply be a child. They cannot afford innocence. Instead, they become something no child should ever have to become. A radar station. They learn to read the sound of a key turning in the front door, not just as a sound, but as data. Slow and deliberate means tonight will be quiet. Sharp and sudden means something is already wrong before the door opens. They learn to measure the weight of footsteps coming down the hallway. They learn to watch a parent's jaw tighten over dinner and understand, without a single word spoken, that the next hour will require careful navigation and the skill of making themselves invisible. No one taught them this. Their amygdala, the brain's ancient alarm center, was firing so consistently, so relentlessly, that it eventually carved a single message into the deepest part of their mind. This world is not safe. Keep scanning. Never stop. And so they never did. They kept scanning. They kept watching, year after year, until one day they woke up as an adult, in a different home, a safer life, surrounded by people who meant them no harm. And the radar was still running. The child who once needed to predict danger in order to survive had become an adult who could not stop predicting, even when there was nothing left to predict against. This is the part no one tells you. The shield that once protected them did not disappear when the danger did. It fused into their skin. It became indistinguishable from who they are. So when someone tells them, "You think too much," or "Why can't you just relax?" they are not hearing helpful advice. They are being asked to remove a part of themselves they do not even know how to locate. And when they look back at the child they once were, many of them feel a familiar shame rising quietly. Why am I like this? Why can't I just be normal? Here is what they need to hear. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not a problem to be solved. You are someone whose mind was shaped by the fires it had to walk through. The awareness you carry is not a flaw. It is the scar tissue of a very old kind of courage. And now that we understand where it comes from, we can finally talk about what it looks like to live inside it every single day. Now we need to talk about what this awareness looks like from the inside. Not in clinical language, not in textbook definitions, but in the kind of words that make someone stop, sit very still, and whisper, "That is exactly what happens to me." Sign 1. You are never just having a conversation. For most people, a conversation is simply a conversation. But for you, it is a live performance you are simultaneously acting in and directing from the back of the theater. Your manager sends a message. 8 words. "Can you come by my office later?" Most people read it and move on. You read it and feel the temperature drop. Something in the phrasing. A missing word. The absence of their usual sign-off. Before you have even typed a reply, a courtroom has opened inside your head, and the trial is already underway. Your body is at the desk. Your mind is 3 conversations ahead, searching for the verdict. This is why you arrive home exhausted from days where nothing physically happened. Because while your body was sitting still, your mind just finished running a marathon no one else could see. Sign 2. You are your own harshest judge. You do not simply feel emotions. You put them on trial. Sadness arrives on an ordinary Tuesday. Instead of letting it exist, you immediately cross-examine it. Why am I sad? Is this even rational? I have so much to be grateful for. What is wrong with me? The sadness, which was simply a sadness, becomes evidence of a fundamental flaw. And even joy is not safe. You laugh at a dinner table, genuinely and freely, and within seconds a part of your mind has floated to the ceiling to evaluate the laugh. Was that too loud? Did it sound forced? It is like dancing while staring into a mirror you cannot look away from. You never miss a step, but you never feel the music either. Sign 3. You have lost the ability to take things at face value. A colleague brings you coffee and spends 3 minutes praising your work. Warm, generous, unprompted. And before they finish speaking, you are already scanning for the motive. You do not become bitter. You do not stop caring about people. But you develop an acute awareness of the gap between what people say and what people mean, between the surface of a gesture and its roots. And once you have learned to see that gap, you cannot unsee it. A compliment always arrives carrying luggage. An apology never feels complete. A promise sounds beautiful and fragile. The loneliest part is not the suspicion. It is sitting in a crowded room full of laughter, seeing exactly what is happening beneath the surface, and having absolutely no one to tell. Sign 4. You absorb everyone else's pain as if it were your own. You walk into a room, and within minutes you have registered the tension between 2 colleagues that no one else has noticed. You feel it the way you feel a change in pressure before a storm. Not as a thought, as something in your chest. A friend calls, barely holding it together, to talk about a relationship that has ended. You listen. You say exactly the right things. And when the call ends, the grief follows you home and stays for 3 days. You become the emotional center of every room you enter. People feel genuinely understood around you in a way that is increasingly rare in this world. But almost no one stops to ask how you are doing, because you are so skilled at holding everyone else's weight. It never occurs to anyone that you might be quietly running out of strength to hold your own. Sign 5. Your body has become a battlefield. This awareness does not stay in the mind. It migrates into the body. A single strong coffee sends your heart rate up slightly, nothing unusual. But your nervous system intercepts that signal and sends back a very different message. Something is wrong. Prepare. Cortisol releases. Breathing tightens. And now the physical response to a false alarm is producing real symptoms, which your awareness immediately notices, analyzes, and worries about, which produces more cortisol, which produces more symptoms. A loop with no exit. The result is a life lived at a constant low frequency of unease. Not crisis, not panic, just a persistent hum of alertness that never fully quiets, even on calm days, even in safe spaces, even when every external sign says that everything is fine. Your body is sending emergency signals in an empty room, and you are exhausted from answering them. Sign 6. You have confused control with safety. When the weight becomes too much, the mind reaches for its most trusted tool. If I can predict everything, nothing can hurt me unexpectedly. And so the simulations begin. Quietly, constantly. What if this relationship pulls away? What if everything I am building collapses? If the worst happens, how do I make sure I don't fall apart? This is not pessimism. This is armor. Because in your experience, being blindsided always hurts more than having seen it coming. But here is what actually happens. You become so consumed with mapping every possible future that you lose access to the present. You are sitting across from someone you love, and part of you is already calculating the probability that it ends. You are inside a moment worth inhabiting fully, and you are already somewhere else. Psychology calls this analysis paralysis, but the lived experience of it is simpler and sadder than any clinical term. You are managing your life from behind glass, watching it, protecting it, never quite living inside it. And somewhere beneath all the analysis and the preparation, there is a part of you that is simply, quietly, completely tired. That exhaustion is not weakness. It is the sound of an extraordinary mind that has never once been taught how to rest. And that is exactly where the next part of this story begins. You cannot turn off this awareness. Asking a hyper-aware person to simply stop overthinking is like asking someone with perfect pitch to unhear a wrong note. The sensitivity is not the problem. What you do with it, that is everything. The solution is not to see less. It is to carry less. Principle 1. Not every signal deserves a response. Their mind is a smoke detector with an extraordinarily low threshold. It goes off for smoke. It also goes off for toast. Learning to tell the difference, that is the work. When a friend takes 3 hours to reply, it does not mean the friendship is eroding. When a colleague walks past without smiling, it does not mean something was said behind closed doors. The event happened. The meaning was added. And meaning, unlike facts, can be chosen. They begin practicing one quiet discipline. Notice the signal, but don't follow it home. Principle 2. Feelings are not emergencies. Anxiety arrives. The old response is to immediately dismantle it, find the source, explain it, resolve it, make it stop. But that very act of scrambling confirms to the nervous system that the anxiety was justified, that there was something worth panicking about. The new response is simpler and far more difficult. Sit with it. Not analyze it. Not fix it. Simply observe it the way you observe weather through a window. The heart is beating fast. That is a physical sensation, not a prophecy. The feeling is real. What it means is a story. And stories can be rewritten. Principle 3. Insight without action is enough. They can see clearly that a colleague is performing confidence to hide deep insecurity. They can sense that a relationship in the room is quietly unraveling. They can read between every line of a conversation with uncomfortable precision. And they are allowed to see all of that and do absolutely nothing with it. Not every truth they perceive belongs to them to carry. Not every wound they notice is theirs to heal. Wisdom without boundaries is just exhaustion wearing a noble disguise. The moment they learn to witness without absorbing, everything changes. The shift that makes it all possible when these 3 principles take root. Something unexpected happens. The awareness does not disappear. It does not dull or diminish. It simply stops being a weapon the mind turns on itself. They still walk into a room and feel everything, but they are no longer pulled under by it. That is not a small thing. That is everything. There is a particular kind of person who spends their entire life making sure everyone around them feels understood. They notice when you are tired before you say a word. They choose their words carefully so they never accidentally wound you. They sit with your pain long after you have moved on from it yourself. They hold space for everyone, quietly, consistently, without ever being asked. And yet, they have never once been fully understood themselves. Not because people do not care, but because they are so fluent in the language of others that no one ever realizes they have needs of their own. They give so naturally, so completely, that the giving looks effortless. And what looks effortless rarely gets thanked. This is the final weight, the one that sits deepest. Not the overthinking, not the exhaustion, not the loneliness of seeing too clearly, but the quiet ache of being the person who understands everyone and wondering, in the stillness of 2 a.m., whether anyone will ever truly understand them. The moment everything begins to shift at some point, and it is different for everyone, something cracks open. Not dramatically, not with a breakdown or a revelation that arrives in a flash of blinding light. It happens quietly, almost gently. They are sitting somewhere ordinary. A park bench, a kitchen table, the passenger seat of a car going nowhere in particular. And a thought arrives, not as an analysis, not as a question to be solved, but as a simple, tired recognition. I have been at war with my own mind for a very long time. And they are ready to stop fighting. Not to give up, not to go numb, but to stop treating their sensitivity as a wound that needs to be managed, and begin, slowly, carefully, to treat it as something worth understanding, worth being gentle with, worth, perhaps, even being grateful for. What they begin to understand, they begin to understand that the depth they carry, the same depth that has exhausted them, isolated them, kept them awake through 1,000 quiet nights, is also the very thing that makes them extraordinary. They are the ones who notice the colleague who is struggling before anyone else does. They are the ones whose presence in a room makes people feel genuinely seen. They are the ones who write the message that arrives at exactly the right moment, who ask the question no one else thought to ask, who sit in the silence with someone and make that silence feel less terrifying. The world is not kinder because of people who feel nothing. The world is kinder because of people who feel everything and choose, despite the cost, to keep showing up. The candle and the laser, they once believed their only options were to see everything with brutal clarity or to go blind entirely. The sharp laser or the darkness. But there is a third light, a candle, warm enough to illuminate the room, steady enough to hold through the wind, bright enough to read the truth of a situation without burning it to the ground, and soft enough, finally, mercifully soft enough, to turn toward themselves without flinching. That candle does not expose every flaw in everyone around them. It holds them instead. It says, you do not have to understand everything tonight. You do not have to carry all of it. You are allowed to rest inside your own life. To you, reading this now, if you have made it to the end of this, if somewhere in these words you recognize the texture of your own inner world, then I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive, too intense, too complicated, or too much. You are someone whose nervous system was tuned to receive frequencies that most people cannot even detect. Someone whose mind was built, whether by nature or by necessity, to see beneath the surface of things, to feel the weight of what goes unspoken, to carry awareness like a second skin. That is not a flaw. That is a form of intelligence so rare that most people will spend their entire lives never knowing it exists. The only thing that was ever wrong was that no one taught you how to live inside it without losing yourself. But you are learning now, and learning, even slowly, even imperfectly, even at 2 a.m. when the thoughts are loudest and the silence is heaviest, learning is already enough. You cannot turn off the light inside your mind, but you no longer have to be afraid of it. Let it be a candle. Let it be warm. Let it illuminate the people around you, and let it, at last, illuminate you. Because the ones who feel everything deeply are not the ones who are broken. They are the ones who remind the rest of us, quietly, profoundly, simply by existing, that there is still so much in this world worth feeling.